All right, so this video is about sovereignty, and it's actually a short one. This is what the study design says. So this PowerPoint is on my portal already. The legitimate or widely recognised ability to exercise control over a territory and its borders provides the state with the authority to represent their authority within the international community.
Do we need to know that? Like word for word?
No, you don't. No. The thing with definitions is that if you give them the word for word definition, you'll get 2 out of 2. If you give them a really bad definition with an example, you get 2 out of 2. So this is why we're going to practice putting examples on everything.
So do we write down that definition?
No, it's the same as what we've already got in the notes in the next couple of slides. I don't think it's that useful to memorise definitions. In fact, I discourage people from doing it. It's better to know what the word means and be able to explain it. But it's the same thing we just said. Authority over territory, that authority needs to be recognised internationally. It includes... Sorry, that would be enough.
And
yeah.
You get 2.
But then I would give the example. An example of this is Australia passing laws within its territory. That's 2. So definition questions are always out of 2 marks. And the rule that the assessors have been told is, if it's word for word from the study design, that's 2. If it's a bad definition plus a good example, it's 2.
So if you like did one word difference to that and then just an example,
You'd still get the 2. One word out isn't going to change it. But I'm pretty sure I could take this off the board, give you the question now, and you're all going to be pretty close to 2 anyway. Definitions are the easiest questions to get. They're only out of 2 marks, and the words are usually words that we'll use all year round. So I'm not worried that people need to memorise this at all. It includes control over a territory, the principle of non-intervention. What this means is that Australia has the right, the sovereign right, not to be intervened with by other states. So if Australia wants to lock up all of its Indigenous people, it has that sovereign right. If we want to introduce the death penalty, it's our sovereign right. If we want to destroy the Great Barrier Reef, it's in our territory, it's our sovereign right. So non-intervention is one of the most important principles in international affairs.
But can't the UN intervene?
It can. And when we do the UN, this is why sovereignty is constantly contested, and it's one of the challenges to it. So just because the right exists doesn't mean every state respects it. Anytime you have a war, one state interfering with another state, non-intervention is being violated. When Australia invades Iraq, we've decided we're going to ignore non-intervention. We think we've got good reasons to invade Iraq. So even though that's a part of sovereignty, it doesn't mean it's not violated. Self-determination, which says that the people will determine the leader. Again, that's not always the case in lots of states. There are many states throughout the world who are ruled by royal families or authoritarian regimes that pass down power to their children. And one of the biggest ones is self-defense. We have the right to develop whatever weaponry we need to defend ourselves. But if we believe that, then we also have to believe that North Korea has the right to develop whatever weapons it wants to defend itself. And Pakistan, and Iran, and Russia. So these are some of the common principles or common ideals of sovereignty. Historically, the term came from the sovereign, and it was an idea from around the 16th century, and it was the idea that the sovereign, the ruler of the land, usually a prince or king, had the right to pass laws over the people. So it's not that old an idea, but this image captures one of those princes. That's his territory. He's drawn larger than the territory because he's larger than that area. And he will determine the laws and also the moral laws, what is right and wrong. So this is where the word came from, the sovereign. Of course, today that has now passed down mainly to representative democracy. Is this video? No. In Australia, we can see our sovereign territory. So everything in orange is within our territory. It's within about 250 kilometres of land, which is our economic exclusion zone, and that does include parts of Antarctica and the islands, etc.
Really? Parts of Antarctica?
Yes, although Antarctica has its own set of treaties, so we can't do much with that land.
Why do we own it? Like, how did that work out?
Because we claimed it. Our explorers were one of the first there.
No.
But it's like
What about
It's
New
not
Zealand,
valuable though. You can't do anything with ice.
Sure, it's cool.
It's
there's
cool to
a
have.
lot of countries have one.
Yeah, little slivers of it. They've carved it up, but it's not useful in any way.
New Zealand.
You've got a couple of islands at the top there. Christmas Island and the Cocoa Islands. They belong to Australia. The land around them also is under the sovereign control
Do you own them?
of the Australian state.
How do we determine how much like ocean?
There are international laws which say 255 kilometres or 251 kilometres away from land is your territory that you can use for marine issues. And if your state and another state are really close together, then they put a line in between the two. So you can't get the 250. It's
We're
just
pretty
split in half.
lucky. So is that why
Yes.
Australia always gets into trouble with Indonesia?
That's going to be one of the things we talk about, yes. Because we keep disagreeing on where the boats are. Are they in our territory or their territory? And our boats keep violating their territory. So we keep invading Indonesia every day, accidentally, because our boats keep going into their sovereign territory.
What's the blue bit that's not the water?
I don't know.
That's a
Sovereignty is a touchy issue. And there was a party in a political party in the last election called the Australian Sovereignty Party. Just wackos. But they're pretty funny, so I've got one of the videos, and I hope this opens, because it's a really interesting character. And look, it's great he's gotten involved in politics, just a little bit eccentric.
Hello, I'm Ray Spearing and I'm just another Ockerosi just like you. Look, I want to give you a message here because it's about time we realise what's gone on that is very wrong in our country. So you think that you haven't been deceived by the government and deceived by the media. You think we have an honest government and an honest media giving you honest bulletins. You think that they've sold us out. I want to ask you something. Why are we importing fruit from overseas that's loaded with chemical poisons not permitted in this country? And this was released on several television stations. And I'll tell you why. We've been sold out by some very clever United Nations New World Order propaganda people and the Agenda 21 for so-called sustainable development. These people have the right kind of jargon, the right kind of rhetoric, but they are liars. I'll tell you something, the Liberal Coalition and the Labor governments, they've been duped into signing illegal treaties which are allowing the New World Order and the United Nations to take over your business, take over the farms, take over your property, and eventually take over your freedom. And I've got more to tell you about this in the next bulletin. And on the screen now you can see the phone number if you want to join these people and do something about restoring back to us, back to the Australian people, the Constitution that they have illegally suspended.
I like the professional. I like that he
He's-
decided to wear his professional.
Yeah.
Look, I shouldn't bag him out. What he's doing is quite brave, starting a political party and sharing a message. So I should respect that. But what he's talking about is sovereignty. He's saying that either we've given it up or it's been taken from us. Hence the Australian Sovereignty Party. We don't need to get into some of the issues he raised, but when we do the unit on international law, we'll learn more about how states give up sovereignty. We choose to give it up and how we can benefit from choosing to give it up. It's a cartoon. It is obviously ironic. It's perhaps suggesting that not everyone gets equal amounts of sovereignty, not everyone's sovereignty is equally respected. It's obviously a commentary on the British arriving in Australia and settling here. Another cartoon. So this is in reference to the US invasion of Iraq. Now, if sovereignty is power and authority over your people and territory, and the US, Australia, Britain invades Iraq and takes over Iraq, then Iraq has lost its sovereignty. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that's a good example of one state's sovereignty being lost for the sake of another state. And in this case, the US is saying, well, we'll tell you when you've got sovereignty. Ignore the fact that our military now controls your state and will choose your leaders. We'll let you know when you can have sovereignty back. And there are great debates around the world amongst diplomats about in which situations should we be allowed to suspend someone else's sovereignty. So if the Syrian leader is using chemical warfare against his own citizens, should we go in? If the North Koreans are imprisoning people, if the Russians are beating gay and lesbians on the street, in what situations should we be allowed to suspend a state's sovereignty militarily if necessary? One last example, or two. There are going to be situations where we can't possibly intervene. The region of Tibet has been fighting for independence for a long time. There's no way they're going to get it. They're within the territorial sovereignty of China. China's an enormous military power. Those people who are a nation, so they're ethnically the same, culturally the same, they've got a certain amount of territory, but it's not recognised. And then the question we had before about Australia and Indonesia, you can see where this starts to get really complicated. So all of this is Indonesia. You've got Australia, you've got islands throughout here. Look how close we are in terms of territory with Papua New Guinea, and this is also Indonesia here.
So only West Papua is part of Indonesia?
Yes, so this is split. So everything this way is Indonesia. But the West Papuans want their own nation state. That's going to come at the cost of Indonesia's sovereignty, so they're not willing to give that up. Now, how would we react if Western Australia said, no, we're going to separate. We're economically wealthy, we're mostly white, we want our own state, we're going to vote for it. We wouldn't be that open to the idea. It would come at the expense of power and authority of the state. Just a couple of things. Sovereignty, power and authority. State sovereignty is power and authority of the state. This is a term which isn't going to be used in the course, but I thought I'd bring it up. Popular sovereignty. What might it refer to? Those who did French read people. Yeah. The people ruling over the state. There are almost no popular sovereignty-based countries or states in the world. Switzerland is probably the closest. In Switzerland, in almost every law, everyone votes for that law. So someone wants to pass a law about increasing the tax by 0.1%, every person will vote. And so they've got dozens and dozens of laws a year, whereas in Australia, we don't vote for laws. We vote for politicians who pass the laws. So popular sovereignty has mostly died out. We now have representative sovereignty. We elect leaders who represent the state. Some quotes. The term sovereignty originally, for a long time, expressed the idea that there is a final and absolute authority. So it actually brought order to the world. The world was fairly chaotic in the 16th, 17th century. Lots of different forces fighting for power. Religious groups, political groups, ethnic groups. When sovereignty started to be rolled out, and the French were one of the first, it created order. We had states that were clearly distinguished from each other. And each state looked after its own affairs. Sure, every now and then they'd go to war, but we finally had an absolute authority over one area. We could let them do what they do. These people over here, they can do what they want to do. So it brought some sort of order to world affairs. Sovereignty is merely a name for political activity. Some examples. So putting US bases in Australia, that's a political act. Defending the state militarily, creating laws. So this guy, Collingwood, is suggesting that it's a term, a concept we're using to describe the political affairs of the state. The authority of a culturally diverse group of people to govern themselves by their own ways free from external subordination. I don't even know what I've linked this to. But let's find out.
Oh, hello there. You know the Supreme Court is coming to an important decision soon. Oh, you didn't know about this? The state of Michigan is trying to undermine tribal sovereignty. It affects everybody. The Baymouse tribe bought land with trust money, which then becomes Indian money. In the spirit of nation building, we erected a casino. The state of Michigan went crying to the federal government. Nobody.
He's a pretty cute kid, so that's reason enough to show the video. He's suggesting that the tribal Indians in a particular group, so America still has nations, and those nations actually have some sovereignty still, so they can do what they want with their land. And in America, you can build casinos only on native Indian land. So the only place in America that can have casinos is native Indian land.
Las Vegas, like,
I don't know. Yeah. Or is that the one exception? I don't know. Maybe it was the exchange for taking all the land away from them. I don't know why, but what he's saying is that it's their sovereign right to build a casino on their land, and they're not going to let Michigan interfere with them. I just thought it was a cute video, and he mentioned the word sovereignty. But look, it's actually pretty complex. Someone has written that script for that kid. So, 2 questions for you. And again, when we're doing these questions, we're practicing particular types of questions. First is a define. When we're doing a define question, they're always going to be 2 marks. And you're simply detailing the meaning of a term and you're supporting it with an example. So if you want, you can do 1 sentence for outlining what the term means, 1 sentence for your example, or if you want, you can do 2 sentences for what the term means and 1. But they're short. It's going to be about 3 lines, no more than 4 written lines, if you're handwriting. So that's the first one, a defining question. The second one is an explaining question, so explaining the importance of sovereignty. And we did explain questions last lesson. It's the why. So I want to see the word because. So why is sovereignty important? Your first sentence is probably going to start with sovereignty is important because blah, 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 full stop. Sovereignty is also important because blah, 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 blah. Here is an example, blah, blah. Think about how you divide your 4 marks up to get all the marks.